Okay, everybody, I'd like to call to order this committee, the whole meeting of the Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores. I want to apologize to the members of the public here for being a few minutes late in starting. Thank you for your patience. The second item on the agenda is disclosures of pecuniary interest. I'll ask any member if they have a pecuniary interest with anything on the agenda they'd like to declare. Seeing none, of course, you can do that anytime you need to. We have no additions, deletions, or amendments. There's no requests for open forum this evening, so we'll go directly to delegations. There are 3 delegations. Just remind the delegations, of course, that our delegations are 10 minutes in length, and we'll appreciate your help in sticking to that timeline. So our first delegation this evening is from Tony Alberts, Chair of the Airport Committee, and welcome, Mr. Alberts.
Good evening. Mr. Mayor, member of council, and as chair of the Airport Committee, I am pleased this evening to be able to present to you the 2019 report for the Port Elgin Airport. 2019 was a year of challenges, some greater than others, but I am pleased to report, however, that we were able to work through them for the overall good of our facility. With our airport attendant, Bart Mearsma, being our single-paid staff, he, along with the committee volunteers, were able to maintain the over 30 acres of grass and facilities to the highest possible standards. Once again, we offered daily, weekly, and seasonal tie-down rates for visiting and local aircraft, with 100 low-lead avgas being available at $2 a litre. 2019 brought visitors from over 30 different airports, from Victoria, British Columbia, Wawa, Ontario, and Columbus, Ohio, just to mention a few. With the movement being the taking off or landing of an aircraft, 2019 saw 800 movements recorded during our regular hours of operation from 9 a.m. until 5 p.m. This is a 19% increase over 2018. Because the airport is not staffed every day and after 5 p.m., an estimation factor of 55% is applied to the recorded number, and as a result, we have an estimated total of 1,250 movements in 2019 for the Port Elgin Airport. Regardless of the reasons, pilots made Port Elgin their destination of choice, some wanting to visit family, walk our trails, hit the beach, or just have a nice dinner at one of our many restaurants available to them in Port Elgin. Many visitors do ask the same question year after year, that is, how do we keep all that grass? There's a lot of it. Copa for Kids was once again hosted by the Port Elgin Flying Club in conjunction with Copa 172 from Kincardine on July the 13th, 2019. The Copa for Kids program is sponsored by the Canadian Owners and Pilots Association. In conjunction with local COPA members, the program focuses on youth between the ages of 8 and 17. This was the 4th year for the event here in Port Elgin, and once again it was met with great enthusiasm, many energetic kids from across the municipality in Southern Ontario, with visitors from Brampton, Guelph, and the GTA, making Saugeen Shores a destination point for the event. Many of these visiting families spent the entire day in the area, visiting local beaches, restaurants, following their flight, which took them from Port Elgin east to Erin Lake, then north over Chesley Lake, south back over Denny's Dam, eventually over Chantry Island, and back into Port Elgin. There were 48 flights that day, with kids on board during the event. 9 additional aircraft arrived from other airports, 5 from our neighbors in Kincardine, 3 from Hanover, and 1 flew all the way from Guelph just to help us out here in Port Elgin. This event generated an additional 118 movements during the day, with 117 children, once registered, were taken for a short ground school prior to the 30-minute flight. And this was a 20% increase over 2018's event. 10 pilots participated with an additional 12 volunteers, as many hands are needed for registration, ground school, aircraft parking, and loading to ensure that the event ran safely and smoothly. Bart, our airport attendant, was a very busy man that day, as he wanted every visitor to enjoy their time while with us. And of course, he talked to folks about Saugeen Shores and our great little airport. The event organizers were also able to accommodate one local family with 2 children having special needs. With a little extra time, coordination, these two boys had an experience that they will remember for years to come. Operating the airport takes not just time, energy, and passion, it also takes funding, which the committee is very thankful for. We recognize that life is not always perfect, and we are always looking for ways to improve not just our facility and the way it is run, but also the relationship that we have with the municipality and its staff. As illustrated, a significant amount of the 2019 grant will be going into the airport reserve. This is a result of the entire grant being held by the municipality, while many of our operating expenses are paid directly from the airport's bank account. Since becoming chair, I have made a point of having face-to-face conversations when required with town staff. I am pleased to report to you that following these positive interactions, I believe that we have resolved some of these issues and look forward to an improved process in 2020 to ensure that the airport grant is utilized in the most efficient and effective manner for the overall good of the airport and the municipality. As shown on our 2019 revenue includes a used portion of the grant and was a total of $33,190.55, while our operating expenses for the year were $34,189.68, with this shortfall being covered from the Meridian bank account for the airport. At the time of this report, the Meridian account had a balance of $26,316 in it, which is $2,141 below its opening balance for 2019. Considering our current accounts receivable, we will see an improvement to this before the end of the year. However, we still anticipate a decrease in our Meridian account of approximately $1,000, with $5,190 from the grant going directly into the reserve. We anticipate having a total of $34,172 in the airport reserve at the end of the year, which will position us favorably to make the upgrades to the fueling system we are currently working on, thanks to the hard work of our municipal project planner and our fuel vendor. Looking into next year, we have lots of work ahead of us with a few projects that have been in the works for some time, one for over 5 years. We're looking forward to the completion of the avgas upgrade with new pumps and an above-ground tank. Pilots look for certain weather-related information prior to landing and taking off at the airport, and we are looking at upgrading the airport weather station so our attendant will be able to provide this vital information when requested. 2019 saw visibility challenges around the facility with the lighting currently the way it is, and we plan to improve the terminal and apron area lighting with upgrades in 2020. And of course, we would not be doing our job if we could not provide another Copa for Kids. So we currently have Copa for Kids planned again next summer for July the 11th. 2020 will bring its challenges, but with the continued support of this council and our amazing town staff, we will once again deliver an airport that is considered to be one of the best and the friendliest in the province. Thank you for the time, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Tony. And before I take any questions, I think you have some other members of your committee here in the room. I wonder if you'd introduce them to us.
We have Kevin Yurskavich, the Vice Chair, and Randy Linton, our Treasurer.
Very good. Thank you. We really, Council very much appreciates the work of the committee, and we thank you folks for being here this evening. Are there questions or comments from members of the committee? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, and through you. First of all, Tony, I'd just like to extend my appreciation. Earlier this year, you offered to provide me with a tour of the facilities, and in addition to that, I was able to take a flight, which I had certainly never done out of the Port Elgin Airport before. So it was an honor and a privilege for me to see what a number of members of our community put hundreds of tireless efforts into maintaining. So I appreciate the work that you do, and thank you for showing me what I'm sure many of the people in this room don't know is the hidden gem of our community. So thank you, and equally as important, I look forward to bringing my son to Copa for Kids next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions or comments? Councillor Mayat.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, I echo Councillor Smith's comments. That it's a wonderful facility, and I've sat on the airport committee for the past 5 years, currently as the alternate, but I've gotten to know these guys really well, Tony and Kevin and Randy and the gang, and it is certainly a wonderful facility, and I remember bringing my children there when they were 5 or 6 or 7 years old, and they got their Eagle Wings with Kevin as the pilot back in those days. And I'm sure there are hundreds, if not thousands, of kids that have grown up in our community that got their first chance to ride in an airplane through this, and not just in our community, but outside of our community. And it's a wonderful service, and it's a wonderful amenity that we have in our community. And not unlike the trailer parks or the harbors, it's one of those amenities that attracts people, that is unique, and it rounds out the facilities that are available in our community, and the amount of work that these guys do on their own. They're out there fixing things or maintaining the building. They don't come back and often ask for financial or otherwise assistance other than the grant that they get here. And I think that the $22,000 grant is money well spent. And I encourage you guys to keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions or comments from members of the committee? Well, thanks very much, Tony. Really, as you know, we're working our way through our 2020 budget deliberations now, so probably sometime in the first number of weeks of the new year, we'll let you know how that turns out with regard to the airport committee. But certainly from my perspective, as Councillor Mayette said, this is really an excellent investment for the municipality to have an airport a functioning airport at that price. Is really a hard deal to beat, and you guys make that possible. So we really appreciate all the work that you do for us at the airport. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So with that, we'll move on to Tanya Dickinson from Bruce County Housing Service, the Bruce County Housing Services Manager, and Christine McDonald, the Director of Human Services at the County of Bruce, and they're here to talk to us about affordable housing. Christine and Tanya.
So good evening, Mayor and Council members. We're really happy to be here to talk to you tonight. Of course, our Human Services Department encompasses a number of programs and services, but specifically we'll focus on housing tonight. And Tanya can take it away from there with some descriptions about what we do in the Housing Services Department.
Just a little introduction to what we do in housing services. So we are the designated service manager for the county to administer housing and homelessness programs. We do this in conjunction with several partners, including the YMCA, the Salvation Army, the United Way, Mawikwadon, SOHAC, Women's House, just to name a few. We own and operate 679 units across the county, including rent-geared income units and affordable units. We also administer the Community Homelessness Prevention Initiative, or CHIPPI, as many may have heard. This offers our Housing Stability Fund, working with those who are at risk of homelessness or who are homeless. We have a community support coordinator who also administers the program and also works with those who are at risk of eviction. And through the CHIPPI program, we provide funding to the YMCA to deliver their housing support program, including emergency shelter solutions. So in Saugeen Shores, we have 146 rent-geared income and market units. 28 are affordable, and approximately 35 rent subsidies that we issue to private landlords across the region. So in 2019, we updated our housing and homelessness plan to better understand what is happening across the county and to offer specific actions to address the identified issues. Upon review, we recognize that although several of the issues remain the same from 2013, others have emerged over the past 5 years. We have determined this is an ideal opportunity to explore the change and refine the plan to reflect the renewed awareness of our community, the economic market, and affordable housing. So we use several methods of consultation and to provide information to inform the plan. So we had a consultation with 30 key stakeholders and community agencies. We held key informant interviews, and we had an online survey which was completed by 117 residents. We identified the following housing issues, which are lack of supportive and accessible housing, the idea that employment trends continue to influence the demand for affordable housing, lack of housing options, maintaining the existing stock is a challenge, the affordability and availability, and a non-diversified new housing. So 71% of all new builds between 2011 and 16 were single detached homes. So this is a graph of our current waiting list as of September 30th of 2019. So we currently have 569 applicants waiting for housing. 347 applicants are waiting for housing in Saugeen Shores, which accounts for 61% of the wait list. Since 2015, the wait list has increased by 66% overall and 73% in Saugeen Shores. So there's 146 affordable units in Saugeen Shores that we own and operate, and 347 applicants. So this is some data that we found as we were working through our update. So as you can see from this slide, our current vacancy rate is declining. So in 2017, the vacancy rate was 1.4%, whereas a healthy vacancy rate is 3%. I've also listed the average price of a home in 2018 as $351,681, which, based on the census data, means 20% of the population can afford this. So out of the data, we developed 5 strategies to address these concerns. And with those strategies, we developed an action plan. So the first action is to increase our affordable housing stock. So a part of this action involves working with various municipalities, nonprofit housing providers, as well as the county planners to promote affordable housing. And we are in the process of building 35 units in the municipality of Kincardine at this point. We also want to explore a rural mobility model. Although this is outside of the scope of the plan, we have committed to working with all partners to discuss, plan, and support a rural mobility model for the county. We want to better understand the needs of youth and Indigenous populations. So during our homeless count in 2018, these two groups emerged as avenues for further study. So we're hoping by the end of 2021 to have a research project in place to look at these 2 specific groups. We're also working on a coordinated system and strong partnerships to create a coordinated access system to better serve our most vulnerable residents. And finally, increasing the housing support options. So we want to review and determine how best to meet the needs of our most vulnerable citizens by exploring and leveraging supportive housing options.
So I'll talk a little bit about our next steps. Of course, we need to complete the new build that we're working on in Kincardine. And one of the actions that we've outlined in our strategies is a navigational tool that will work in partnership with our planning and development teams and also local level staff is our hope, to make it simpler for interested parties to develop new housing and more diverse housing to increase that availability in our communities. We're also working with our planning and development team on their homes paper, and so that's part of the precursor for planning and development to do some official plan updates, and so that will help to set the stage around how we ensure that more affordable housing is built under the official plan. And we're also exploring innovative new collaboration. So we're constantly in conversation with some of our partners in the nonprofit sector, as well as private developers who are interested in looking at how they make affordable housing financially sustainable for them. And so we're working together on some new ideas there as well too. So just to reiterate, our actions and goals outlined in the plan are a commitment to working towards a community with adequate and affordable housing choices for all, a place where needs can be met to ensure everyone has a safe, affordable, and appropriate home. Any questions?
Thanks very much, Christine and Tanya. Questions from members of the committee? The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your presentation, Tanya. Nice talking to you again today. We had a nice chat. I read with interest, with 347 on the wait list for Saugeen Shores and Kincardine was 262. One of my questions I have is you're building some new housing stock in Kincardine in 2020. How's that decision made in terms of pecking order with a wait list of 347 we had and Kincardine had 262? How are those decisions made? Obviously at the county council level, but can you explain that for me?
So there's a lot of planning that goes into being able to develop a building of that magnitude. And actually, one of the pictures that you saw earlier in the presentation was a picture of our new build that we still call at Wellington Shores. And so actually Port Elgin had our first go at building new stock, and we knew that Kincardine needed new stock as well. It's a challenge in keeping pace with the demand, of course, but the way that we arrive at which projects we're moving forward is that we've done a broader regeneration study of the entire portfolio. The county owns units right across the entire county, and looked at which ones are at the end of their operating life, which ones are at the end of debentures or mortgages. And so there's some financial feasibility study that goes along with that in terms of making those decisions alongside the wait list.
Detailed.
Yes.
So is it fair to assume, though, that Saugeen Shores could be on the horizon, and then 2021, 2022, we're being looked at, obviously?
Yes, absolutely. And the broader piece is that when we're talking about the builds that we're doing, those are our own stock. We have a bit of a mix. So we have rent geared to income, which is the traditional social housing, or now referred to as community housing. And we have some affordable, which is 80% of market. And then we have the modest market units. But we're not the whole picture. So we're doing work alongside the private sector and the nonprofit sector as well, too, encouraging builds in those groups as
So
well.
are the geared to income homes, are they the units that they're rented out for a period of time, then they're actually sold off, or is it the other kind of housing? What housing stock
No, so
is that?
these would be apartment rentals
Okay.
and some townhouses. And so what's happening is that as long as someone still qualifies, they're receiving some subsidy assistance.
So which part of the housing eventually does get sold off, and where does the revenue go for units that do get sold?
So where we've declared units surplus, where we've decided to sell them, it's usually because they're no longer serving the purpose. So for example, we have some walk-up style apartment buildings that we can't make AODA accessibility compliant. They can be used for general purpose in the community for other reasons. And so we sell those and replace them with new units.
Okay.
So those would come from the same stock, but anytime we've been selling, we've been replacing with new.
Okay, I just had a couple. I hope that's okay, Mr. Mayor. I had a call from a resident recently that was paying $1,200 a month plus utilities, not a high income family, and got kicked out literally out of their rental unit, and just recently had found something about at $1,900 plus utilities, and have about $300 to $400 per month left for groceries. Not a lot of money left at the end of the day, so there is a need, obviously. And our community's no different. There, and how everybody works Bruce Power. I hate to say that, but it's a fact. And there are people in this community that do live in poverty, and we do have a real need from a attainable housing standpoint. This council will be looking at some terms of reference for a new attainable housing task force, hopefully in the new year. I'm going to be presenting something. And is it something that the county would have an interest in partnering with our municipality from an attainable housing task force standpoint?
Absolutely.
Heads are nodding, because we'll be calling upon you, hopefully, if it gets approved. The other thing I wondered about was dealing with partnering with the municipality. We have a shortage of attainable housing in this community. What do you look for from a municipality when it comes to building new stock? Obviously land is a big thing.
Absolutely.
And would that be one of is that the most important factor? There's lots of cost to build attainable housing, obviously, but housing is a big one. What would you look for from the municipality?
So preliminarily, land is helpful. If there's serviced surplus land that's available to go and it's zoned appropriately for residential, that definitely is helpful. And Saugeen Shores did donate the land for the last build that we had. It was actually a brown space that we cleaned up and converted, so there was a little bit more involved in that than ready to go serviced land. That is a big part of it. Some of the work that we'll be doing with the planning and development team in early 2020 will help us further define define what asks we might have of municipalities, but certainly we're interested in partnering and looking at how we can leverage opportunities.
Last question, Mr. Mayor, and I'll stop. In terms of obtaining tiny homes, container homes, secondary dwelling suites, is that something the county is interested in, all of the above, partnering with something like that, with municipalities, contractors, investors, all of those three? Any of those three?
So a lot of those questions refer again back to the official plan. So through the work that we'll do in the preparation for what are we looking at in terms of our strategic vision for as a county, we'll be looking at that. And then of course some of the answers are in the local plans as well too, in terms of if there's a minimum house size, all those services and different pieces. So there's more research really that needs to be done in tiny homes and some of those pieces.
Well, I'm looking forward to working with you.
Further questions from members of the committee? Councillor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Aaron. Through you. Thanks for the presentation. I am somewhat familiar with the work that you do. Not only through the members of the community that I know that are either in or waiting for attainable housing, but also through my work with the United Way. And I know that the United Way refers people to you guys and vice versa. And also through the United Way, I had a chance this summer to work on the Habitat for Humanity build up in Cape Croker. And that was, anybody who's ever done that gets a great deal of pleasure out of it, and I encourage anybody to try it. You didn't mention anything about Habitat, and Habitat has been here to Saugeen Shores specifically, and once again it goes back to the Vice Deputy Mayor's comments about land. If they have a spot of land, they can get the house built on it. Do they approach the county as well, looking for opportunities? Because it's a great program, and it's a great way for people who are lesser advantaged to actually get into home ownership. And if so, how can we work closer with the county to make some of those things happen?
So we have worked closely with Habitat in the past, and we offer a 5% down payment loan through our investment in affordable housing program, which is actually ending, but there's a new program coming in its place. So we have worked with them to help the buyers with their 5% down payment for the homes. And I do talk to Habitat on a regular basis just to keep informed of what's going on, and so that we can hold some money back if they do have some builds that we can offer that 5%.
Further questions from members? Thank you both very much for coming. We've had a really good partnership with the County of Bruce over the years in terms of providing affordable housing. Obviously, we have a greater need now than we have ever had before, which means we're going to need to deploy more resources in every direction to deal with the issue. And I certainly Saugeen Shores stands ready to partner with Bruce County and however we can to do that. I also have appreciated in recent months the work that we've been able to do together on some private sector opportunities. The great advantage that Saugeen Shores has now is that we are growing and that a lot of people want to build in Saugeen Shores. And in order to build here, I think we need to expect that they provide affordable housing as part of their developments. And so I think that we have that opportunity here to leverage our growth for the benefit of those folks who need housing in our community, and we need to do that. I'm very much looking forward to the official plan reviews, both at the county and at the town of Saugeen Shores, so that we can put the tools in place through the regulatory framework to make sure that happens. So that's another piece we'll work together on, and I'm looking forward to. So thank you guys very much for coming. I appreciate it very much. So our last delegation is from Peggy Corrigan-Dench and Glenna Snyder to talk to us about the waterfront revitalization. Ms. Corrigan-Dench and Ms. Snyder.
I'm going to start again. Thank you, Mayor and Councillors, for allowing us to speak tonight. I have some questions and concerns regarding the report to be presented to Council on the second waterfront project ad hoc committee. This meeting was held on September 25th. The mandate for this committee was to review the feedback received through the community consultation process on the phase of the Cedar Crescent Village project and make a recommendation to Council for this proposal. The members of this ad hoc committee included 3 citizens of Saugeen Shores, Councillor Jamie Smith, and the Mayor as chair. The committee was summarizing all the surveys, results, communiques, emails, media reports, etc., that had been accumulated up to that date. Kudos to the committee for declining at the close of the meeting to make a recommendation to Council since they hadn't yet seen the final plans. The Mayor had brought a draft of his final report and gave it to the committee members just prior to the meeting. This final report, dated October the 15th, 2019, has apparently not yet been shared with Council, but we received a copy through Freedom of Information. In the first paragraph, under background, it states that the primary duty of this committee was to identify strengths and areas of opportunity in the waterfront proposal related to feedback received and make a recommendation to Council on the proposal. This was to be an unbiased summary of information received, organized into buckets or categories as Councillor Smith suggested. The job of the committee was not to put forth their own opinions or respond to the concerns raised by citizens' comments. Somewhere between September the 11th and September the 25th, either the Mayor, the CAO, or staff and Mr. Giannini responded to each one of the concerns and put their responses into the report. In my opinion, this was inappropriate. When the Port Elgin Beach Preservers received a copy of the report, we were surprised to see that the responses to the concerns were in the report and had been included. It appeared that the work of the committee had been manipulated to support the current proposal. When the discussions of the draft report, Councillor Smith took objection to a line in the report that stated, on the whole, there was support for the development. As we heard it, she did not feel that this was an accurate description of the summary of the communiques that she had read, and yet it remained in the final report to Council. Another concern that we have is with the following statement in the report. In paragraph 1 on page 2 of the report, it states, opposition from property owners adjacent to the site is understandable and not unexpected, but it should not overshadow the considerable support expressed for the proposal to the broader community. We don't know who wrote this statement in the final report, but we challenge it. There's been repeated opposition from people who live nowhere near the lake or adjacent to the property, myself included. I live 12 blocks away from the water. There were 4,400 people who signed a petition. We have over 800 people in our Facebook group at the Port Elgin Beach Preservers. Less than 10% of the population who responded to the town's online survey, which was available for only 2 weeks, only 24% of respondents to that survey felt that a conference center was extremely or very important in their preferences for amenities. The strongest responses were for better parking, more towel space, and a restaurant. Visitors to the beach were not surveyed at all, as recommended in the Waterfront Master Plan in 2013. So yes, there is overall support for revitalization, but not necessarily for this particular concept plan. In our notes, Herb Schmidt, Jamie Smith, and Bob Clarence agreed that the committee needed to meet again in order to make a recommendation. In this report, under recommendation, it reads that the Council received this report from the Waterfront Project Ad Hoc Advisory Committee. This is not a recommendation in my view. Will the Ad Hoc Committee be reconvened to make a recommendation to Council when the final plans are released? We've now learned that on December the 16th, there will be a new Committee of the Whole meeting that has been set to review the waterfront lease agreement. That means that you will only have 1 week to review these concerns. Please hold a larger public meeting before a vote. Even better, put off any decision until spring when we can assess the potential damage of high water, flooding, and erosion on the shoreline. As an aside, when we were here on November the 25th, the Port Elgin Beach Preservers held a peaceful rally here at the municipal offices. We left our signs outside as requested, intending to retrieve them. Someone stole our signs. The police are following up. Now I'm going to ask Glenna to finish the talk that we presented, and she's going to come up.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors, for allowing us to speak this evening. The Port Elgin Beach Preservers wish to pose a few questions regarding the lease being negotiated at this time between the town and Ontario 152143. For this endeavour, we've enlisted the guidance of Mr. Jonathan Tinney, a friend and frequent visitor to Saugeen Shores. He is a registered professional planner working as Director of Design with a Toronto firm. Prior to December 2018, he was Director of Sustainable Planning and Community Development for the City of Victoria, British Columbia. We realize this is an ongoing process. We asked Mr. Tinney to identify his areas as he felt required. Additional consideration or clarification by the municipality. He asked that it be noted that the detailed plans for the proposed development have not been released publicly, and so the graphics provided on the following slides 4, 5, and 6 were his own, based on available proposed site plans, and subject to change once the final plans are released. An RFP was issued in February 2019. A plan accepted and a memorandum of understanding was entered into on June 10, 2019. These documents and the initial concept designs are presented to the public, were presented to the public on July 22nd. They were provided to Mr. Tinney as sources of reference for his input. The request for proposal for the site laid out the extent of the site to be considered, as outlined in red on the slide. As you can see, it appears both wider and deeper than laid out within the terms of reference of the RFP. If a new building is desired, the location could be moved to be closer to the water, and the existing parking lot moved closer to the street. The Memorandum of Understanding, signed June 10, 2019, took these parameters even further, stating commitment by the municipality to consider alternative options outside of the scope of the suggested footprint, if in keeping with the vision of the waterfront, of the Port Elgin waterfront. Why was this wording changed from the RFP to the memorandum? When and by whom was a decision made to allow such drastic variances from the original RFP? Who decided that the concept plan of July 22nd was, quote, in keeping with the vision of the Port Elgin waterfront? Given the changes now evident in the size and the scale of Cedar Crescent Village, the town had every right and responsibility to amend and or reissue this RFP. In his slideshow presentation of September 9th, the proponent indicated a mix of amenities for the beachfront development site, which will need to comply with existing land use and zoning regulations. The site area is governed by two zoning areas: marine commercial and open space. While the marine commercial designation appears to be in sync with many of the uses proposed, it is difficult to determine if the several retail commercial units, CRUs, align with the goals and requirements of the official plan.
We're just passing over the 10-minute mark, Ms. Snyder, so if you could just wrap it up, that would be nice. Thank you.
Of these units at this time. A significant portion of the buildings, in terms of square footage, are located in the open space area. Unless the site plan shown on July 22nd and again on September 3rd has been amended to place these buildings totally in the marine commercial area, it's Mr. Tinney's opinion that an amendment to the official plan under Section 319.436 will be required to support approval of the project. In this slide, the section in yellow indicates the 15-meter setbacks required in the zoning bylaws. If this retail area is still a part of the site plan, addressing these setback requirements may, at a minimum, require a variance to the zone or redesign of the current concept. The conference event hall being proposed as part of the restaurant could pose some issues with zoning compliance as well. While there's no definition in the zoning bylaw for recreational activities, a definition for recreational center is provided as an arena, a swimming pool, community center, curling rink, outdoor ice rink, a sports field or court, fitness facility, and uses accessory thereto. Mr. Tinney felt this definition suggests a public leisure focus that does not likely encompass.
Ms. Snyder, we're now passing over 12 minutes. I need you to wrap it up, please. Thank you. Well, just we need you to wrap it right up, so if you could just make your last thought, that would be appreciated. Or your mic is off there. Turn your mic on for me, would you?
Surely the town needs to adequately assess and understand the fair market value of the site and the value of any in-kind contributions or services, usually done via value for money analysis. This VM ensures these services or contributions represent a benefit commensurate with the value of the site. Has the VFM analysis been done? Thank you for listening. We hope that many of these questions have been considered and acted upon by the town. Once again, may I remind you that we are not opposed to revitalization. We just want it done right and fairly.
Thank you, Ms. Snyder. And Ms. Corrigan-Dench, are there questions or comments from members of the committee? I'll just let council know the question was raised about the report from the Waterfront Project Ad Hoc Committee, and that report will be coming to council along with the recommendation from staff with regard to this project on the 16th. So, thank you very much, and that will move us then on to reports of municipal officers, and we have the general government reports, and the first one is a staff report on the employee code of conduct policy, and the manager of strategic initiatives has the report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening. Just very quickly, I have revised our employee code of conduct. Really, the code of conduct is to set clear expectations for our employees. It's developed in partnership with the senior management team, human resources, and a staff ambassador group in-house. A code of conduct is a common workplace policy, and it's certainly in place to protect the employer and the employee. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from members of the committee? I'll read the recommendation, and if there are, we can have them. It's recommended that Council approves the revised Employee Code of Conduct policy dated December 9, 2019. If there are no questions or comments, I'll ask all in favor. Thank you very much. And that moves us then on to a staff report on the MOU for the Municipal Innovation Council and the Manager of Strategic Initiatives.
Thank you. The MOU for the Municipal Innovation Council, also known as MIC, has been developed collectively with our partners. So we do have 7 formalized partners right now with the MIC, and we're expecting a couple of more in early 2020. So it has been developed together. It is a collaborative approach, and today I'm looking for authorization for this MOU to be signed for the town of Saugeen Shores to finalize our participation in the MIC.
Thank you. It's recommended that Council pass a bylaw to authorize the Mayor and Clerk to sign a Memorandum of Understanding for the Municipal Innovation Council. Questions or comments from members of the committee? Councillor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And congratulations, Jessica, on attracting so much participation in the Municipal Innovation Council. It's a very exciting initiative, and I presume it'll start to grow legs once the building that next door that will soon house the Nuclear Innovation Center gets operational. And at which point in that continuum will we be actually looking at hiring a lab director? And how do you see that budgetary process and things playing out?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So we have had some preliminary conversations on the lab director. Certainly the membership of the MIC understands that that's a collectively funded position. So we're in very good shape now with our 7 partners and expecting a couple of more. So very good shape. I would like to have that position posted in Q1 of 2020 and then advance that. You will also note in the report we do have a save the date for our elected officials and senior municipal staff for a launch event of Municipal Innovation Council. So we can look forward to more announcements of that.
That's excellent. Q1 2020, that's a very aggressive plan, and congratulations on that. Do you have a rough idea as to what the job description is? Because I don't think we have a lab director in our current organization, so you're going to have to develop a new set of skills, and what kind of skills are you looking for in that person?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So I've reached out to a couple of colleagues across the country, and I've gathered a few examples of what a lab director job description could look like from a public sector sense. What I really hope to find is somebody that is well connected, out of the box thinker, somebody very innovative, but somebody also very solution driven. They'll be handed a number of challenges that we are facing here in Bruce County, and I'm going to need them to really hit the ground running and help us find some solution and help us have some win. So I'll look forward to sharing that description when I have something a little bit more formalized. Thank you.
Further comments, the Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Jess, I'd like to congratulate you on all the work you've done. As Councillor Mayette said, it's taken a lot of work to bring in these municipalities and a couple more on the way. That would be great. I look forward to the kickoff. I look forward to what this Innovation Council can do and bring to our municipalities. I think it's going to be a great opportunity. We're all going to succeed. We're all going to benefit for it. So thank you very much for what you're doing, and keep up the good work.
Further comments? I just echo that. Thanks very much, Jessica. This is a tremendous success to have this many on board, and we're looking forward to seeing what transpires in the new year. I'm sure it's going to be very exciting. So, if there's nothing further, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. So, that then moves us on to 7.3, Infrastructure and Development, and a staff report on SSOPA 3419.48 and Z 2719.48 and 41T 92.48, Southampton Golf Club, and the planner, Tessa, has the report. Tessa.
Thank you. So this is a report that's coming forward for a recommendation. There was an information report on this proposed subdivision in the summer, so I'm realizing now I usually have a PowerPoint for you. I don't have one tonight. I think that just slipped through the cracks, so I apologize for that, but hopefully you have the information you need in the report. So there's a few recommendations tonight. The primary one is to adopt the official plan amendment, which will then be forwarded to County Council for approval. Once the official plan amendment, should it be approved, go forward, then once that's done, we would want to see the zoning bylaw amendment move forward, and then the actual draft plan of subdivision once the zoning bylaw and official plan amendment are in place. So just to give a quick refresher, this is a proposal for a plan of subdivision adjacent to the Southampton Golf and Country Club along Division Street. So it's changed slightly since you saw it in the summer. There's been an addition of a few units, 4 new units to go up to 39 townhouses and 3 blocks of open space and conservation. So this is a 3-hectare parcel, and it has access to municipal services along Division Street, and does require the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment to move forward. So currently the lands are designated residential and are subject to the significant woodlands overlay. There's also small portions of the site that are designated parks and open space and highway commercial, and these are the 2 areas that are subject to the official plan amendment. It's proposed to change those designations to residential. And then the last designation on the land is the environmental hazard, and that's just proposed to be refined based on the updated engineering. In terms of the zoning, it's currently mostly zoned planned development. All those lands outside of the hazard are planned development, and it's proposed to be rezoned to a residential third density special to allow for the proposed townhouse development. So there are a number of areas that were considered. I would note that there were a number of new updated documents received from the applicant on October 7th, so these have been reviewed for the purposes of this recommendation. So in terms of natural heritage, as this is a significant woodland that this is being proposed in, this was something that had to be looked at closely. There was an environmental impact study that was prepared, and a constraint site plan has also been prepared in conjunction with the draft plan. And so from the EIS, no interior woodland habitat was identified, but a tree cutting plan through the constraint site plan was prepared to address the feature and to protect some locally significant species. So there are 2 locally significant plant species that were identified on the property, and these are on what is shown as Block 36 today, and which is proposed to be open space and conveyed to the town. So we find that the constraint site plan addresses the natural heritage policies of the official plan, and the SVCA has also provided their peer review of the document, and they have no issues as well. In terms of the natural hazard, as I mentioned, there's a revision to those hazard lands on the lot. So these are kind of at the southern end of the lot, close to the intersection of Division Street and Highway 21. So all development will be located outside of these hazardous lands, and they'll be designated and zoned for environmental protection. In terms of water, sewer, and stormwater services, the functional servicing report has been prepared, as well as the draft stormwater management plan, and these have been revised in those October documents. And these documents assert that there is enough capacity for water and sanitary services, and that stormwater management can be appropriately managed on the site through without the need for a stormwater management pond. And these documents have been reviewed by Town of Saugeen Shores staff, and they've raised no concerns. All the technical details of these plans will be worked out through the draft approval process and the subdivision agreement. In terms of an efficient use of land and resources, this property is located within a settlement area, and it is considered a greenfield. It has direct access to year-round municipal road and municipal services, and there's enough area to accommodate a housing density as proposed at approximately 20 units per hectare, while also providing the necessary environmental protections on the lands. So we're satisfied that this makes an efficient use of the proposed lands, and given the nature of the site. In terms of subdivision policies, the province, county, and town all have various policies relating to subdivisions. The initial report from July 2019 laid out the provincial side of things quite thoroughly. The modifications since then do not impact any of the provincial interests, so I haven't gone into them again here. In terms of the county official plan, the policies, there's a number of policies provided for consideration for draft plans of subdivision, which are a county level approval. So county council or its delegative representative needs to ensure that all subdivisions meet these policies, and I'm satisfied that they have, as laid out in the report. Section 211 of the Saugeen Shores official plan also provides for several policies for consideration when recommending approval to subdivisions, which is what we would recommend council to do. And we're satisfied that all of the criteria laid out in the Saugeen Shores official plans related to subdivision have been met, as I've laid out in the report as well. Now, this development, as it is 100% townhomes, is considered 100% medium density, so we also had to consider the medium density development policies of the official plan, and these I've included in the report how I believe that this is being met through the proposal, and so we're satisfied that this meets the requirements for medium density development. In terms of housing affordability, this was, I know, is an issue for the town. And I would note that both the county and the town of Saugeen Shores have targets for 30% of development to be affordable to the 60th percentile of households. Now, I would note that these are targets. It is not policy. In terms of the Saugeen Shores official plan, the 30% of affordable, 30% of units being provided as affordable is within the objectives section of the official plan. But our housing policies for the town of Saugeen Shores do not include any specific requirements for housing to be developed in terms of number of units or percentages. So it is a target, and it's not expected that every development will meet that. It's kind of something to strive for and an overall consideration of development for the town of Saugeen Shores. So in this case, the applicant is proposing to construct 8 townhomes with smaller footprints. So this was the change from the draft plan back in July. And these would be smaller units sold at a lower price. And just in terms of some of the numbers, you heard a bit of them from the delegation earlier. But the affordable price for a home in the 60th percentile of income is about $330,000. And these ones are proposed at around $350,000, last I was informed. But the developer notes, or the applicant's planner notes, that at 150 square meters or 1,600 square feet of habitable floor area, these units would be larger and have the capacity to accommodate more than just a person or two. In terms of the town official plan, the town staff have proposed as a condition of draft approval that 6 units be provided to meet the definition of affordable under the official plan. Now, for the town of Saugeen Shores, your official plan relies on the PPS definition. And so in terms of home ownership, a dwelling is considered affordable when it is the least expensive of housing for which the purchase price results in an annual accommodation cost which do not exceed 30% of gross income, which is that number I just provided, about $330,000. Or housing for which the purchase price is at least 10% below the average purchase price for a resale unit in the regional market area. And in this case, the regional market area is Bruce County, which puts the average 10% below the average resale price at $317,000. So that's what we're looking at in terms of the numbers, in terms of affordable units currently under the PPS. But I would note that there's none of our policies under the current official plans, as they're currently drafted, provide us any real way to require any affordable units be provided in any particular development. So we do have to work with our developers to provide those. So just know that these 6 units proposed, we feel, contribute to that target of 30% affordable units for the overall development in the town. And so I do believe it still meets the intent of the Saugeen Shores official plan, as there's no specific direction in the plan to provide 30% in every development. And so in terms of the required amendments, the official plan designations, as I've said, we're just changing it mostly to residential, getting rid of the parks and open space, which is really a mapping error. When you look at it on the maps, it's clear that it should follow the northern road allowance. And removing the highway commercial designation from the lands and converting that to residential. In terms of the special provisions required for the zoning, one is for a smaller minimum lot size for those proposed 8 units. That would be smaller. The minimum lot size in the R3 zone for a townhouse is 300 square meters. The smallest units in the subdivision are proposed at 212 square meters. These lots will continue to meet the required frontage and coverage provisions, and so we feel that despite the reduced lot size, these continue to meet the intent of the zoning bylaw. We're also required to include a provision for coverage. This is due to an oversight. You may remember that there was a housekeeping amendment done a few years ago in 2017. The intent in that housekeeping was to provide for 50% coverage in R3 and R4 zones. Through the review of this application, we realized there was an administrative oversight, and that specific amendment was through the housekeeping was not put on the final bylaw. So it was the intent of council through our review of the minutes and the report and everything to permit that increased coverage. It wasn't done, so that'll be something we'll have to update in a future housekeeping. So we are recommending that 50% be permitted here in line with that previous report. Finally, the 3 blocks of open space will be, the 3 blocks for environmental protection and open space will be rezoned to open space, and some environmental protection in order to reflect the hazard lands mapping, and those are proposed to be conveyed to the town. So overall, we feel that the proposed amendments as modified since the public meeting, those few additional units to those 8 smaller units to meet a higher affordability standard are relatively minor, and that no further consultation is required on this matter, and that overall the proposed development meets the objectives of the official plan, and through the amendments will comply with the intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw and represents good land use planning. So we do recommend approval.
Thank you, Tessa. I'll read the recommendation, then we can take questions or comments from the committee. It's recommended that the committee adopt official plan amendment number 34 by Southampton Golf and Country Club, and the necessary bylaw be forwarded to County Council for approval. That the committee approve zoning bylaw amendment Z 2719.48 as attached, and the necessary bylaw be forwarded to Council for adoption, and that no further public meeting is required. That the final adoption of the associated zoning bylaw amendment Z 2719.48 be deferred pending approval of the official plan amendment by County Council, and that committee recommend that Council provide direction to the County of Bruce Approval Authority that the proposed draft plan of subdivision 41T 19-2.48 be approved as modified in accordance with the draft conditions attached. Questions or comments from the committee? Councillor Rich.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. So just listening through, so we've got 8 units that are smaller lots to be affordable housing, and you said, am I correct in saying that they're going to be about $320,000? Is that, or because you kind of moved around it a little bit, I wasn't quite sure whether or not you said that it was a recommendation, or whether you're going to have those units be the at the 30th percentile.
So the developer is proposing 8 smaller units. The town of Saugeen Shores has provided the county with a proposed draft condition of approval, which would require 6 units, not specifying any ones, but 6 units that would have to meet the definition of affordable under the town's official plan. And that under the town's official plan, that's the PPS definition, which would be about $320,000.
So there will be 6 units to 8 units that will sell for $320,000.
If they're being sold, if it's ownership, then yes, that's the definition. In order to meet that condition, I believe so, as it's worded currently.
The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, sounds like a great development. I have a problem, though. Every time we have a development, we have our bylaws and size restrictions, and everybody asks for a variance on these. It's supposed to be at 300. Now we're asking for 220, 210, 25. When do we stop that? When we have a set size, why don't we stick with that? Why do we keep changing it?
The original proposal in July didn't request any changes. These smaller units were done in order to be smaller and sold at a lower price point after direction from at that meeting that more affordable units should be provided.
So we went from 6 to 8, but you said earlier that they're at 300 square feet. Now we want to drop it down to 220. Is that correct?
Well, no. In July, none were proposed as
But right now,
affordable
you
housing.
said the size of the units that will be there now, were going to be 300, and we dropped the size down to 220. Is that correct?
Yes, because they fit in 4 additional units compared to the previous plan.
So instead of dropping them down, why do we not just stick with the proposed sizes that we set out in our bylaws?
Because the planners laid out this was a compromise to achieve the what has been offered in terms of affordability by the developer. That's why that occurred. Councillor Grace.
Mr. Mayor, so I have 2 questions, and one I'm going to ask our staff to weigh in on, maybe the Director of Infrastructure. So the first question refers to the functional servicing report that was presented by the proponent. And that report, I'm specifically asking about the opinion that report said that the Southampton wastewater treatment plant had enough capacity or has enough capacity to accommodate the proposed development. The report that was presented that I found on the Bruce County planning site uses 2016 statistics to support its conclusion. And so then this past spring, we held a information meeting with the public, and we have concerns about the fact that the Southampton wastewater treatment plant has not problems, but there are concerns about its capacity going forward in the future. And I understand that this is a projection. We're trying to plan for 15 years into the future and make sure that we have enough capacity to handle that. But just as an example, some of the points proposed in that report indicate that the grit channels have, and I'm quoting, the grit channels have insufficient capacity to handle peak flows, resulting in grit carryover into the oxidation ditches, which are cleaned out annually. That based on the MECP design parameters, the sludge digesters cannot meet plant capacity and are undersized by 60%. So just given the fact that the proponent's report is using 2016 statistics and that our 2019 report is indicating that we're trying to plan to make sure that we can meet the needs of our Southampton wastewater treatment plant, I would like assurance from our staff that our plant does have enough capacity to accommodate this proposed development.
Thank you, and through you, staff does work with the developer through this process to answer those questions that they put in the functional servicing report. So the 2019 work at the Southampton treatment plant, what we're seeing is a lot of infiltration and inflow, so direct correlation from a storm event, getting storm water into the sewers and going to the plant. So even though the plant has capacity issues when it comes to peak flows, it's not it's not sewage as much as it's rainwater in those instances. The plant is functioning okay during the average day, so peak flows are events that happen a lot less frequently. And when you look at this development, 39 houses is about 20 cubic meters per day, and the average flow is 3,000. So you're not going to see an impact to the peak flow problems that are there by this development. Through the draft plan process, we also don't commit capacity, so the capacity will be committed at the agreement stage, and that's when we'll have had time to put in some of the improvements that the EA has said through what we've done with the capital budget.
Thank you for that. My other question, I think, would probably be for Ms. Fortier, and it refers specifically to the November 18th, 2019 letter from the SVCA. In that letter, the SVCA staff requested a statement from the proponent's engineer concluding that the 100-year storm runoff, surface flow in parentheses, is directed so that existing and proposed buildings are not flooded on or off site. And also under the grading plan recommendations, the SVCA staff would like the proponent's engineer to provide a statement advising of the anticipated impact, if any, of the filling and any of the filling and grading, as well as the sidewalks on the regional floodplain elevation. Could you comment on what the plan is moving forward for those SVCA staff concerns?
So those are quite technical concerns, and my understanding was SVCA staff was moving forward with their review of the documents under the assumption that this was draft approved, and so they were, because it had been since July, and then they got new documents in October. So they're working, this is a standard part of working towards any plan of subdivision and the more kind of technical elements of a grading plan. So SVCA, under the conditions of draft approval, needs to sign off on the grading plan and stormwater management plan. So any concerns that they have will continue to be worked out through those detailed engineering processes that don't occur at this stage of draft approval.
Just to clarify, though, those are in the condition of draft approval document, right?
That the SVCA sign off on the grading plan and stormwater management. Yes, I believe it's the stormwater management plan, lot grading and drainage plan, as well as the constraints area. So the grading, the sidewalks would be related to the grading plan.
Thank you.
Further questions? The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Tanya. And the question I have, well, first of all, to the developer, Mr. O'Brien, you're right. I remember that conversation back a few months ago, and we talked about affordable housing, and I know in this community there's not a whole lot of new housing being built for under 500. As a matter of fact, it's a whole lot less under 400 being built, and seemed like a high price, 320, 340,000, but it is what it is in this community. Housing is expensive, and I think getting 6 or 8 in that 350 less is a start. Although it'd be nice to see something in the mid-high twos eventually, but I'm probably not going to see it unless we get into some tiny homes or container homes for a whole lot less. But I just want to thank the developer for listening. I think we've got some housing that's going to be a little bit more affordable, albeit still a significant price. So I just want to recognize that, Mr. Bryan. Jane or Amanda, I'm not sure who wants to answer this question, but the 3 blocks, open space, north of the river, there's a very little green space, Jane, as you know, as Director of Community Service. I think Parks Manager Frank Burrows would be aware of this too. In the Parks Trails Master Plan, it was identified back in 2004, way back, that there is a deficiency north of the river with parkland and green space. So I'm pleased to see, Jane, that there's 3 blocks of open space, and I understand that there's some lands and cash being taken. And I guess my question is the manager of parks or yourself walked the property? And are there pockets of land in those 3 blocks that we're able to put in some, trails, some benches, a swing or a slide? There's really not much out there, and you know that, Jane. So what are the plans for those 3 blocks for open space?
Yeah, certainly early questions, but based on our recommendations on walking through the sites, it'll be more of a natural habitat that we're looking at doing. You won't be seeing a lot of playground equipment, but utilizing some of the resources that are over in those 3 lots. The greater plan is really to look at north of the river and to take a really good look at future development as far as parkland and what can be accommodated north of the river as a whole.
Well, I regret that. I mean, I'm not in support of that. I thought that with that kind of housing being put in there, and there are 6 or 8 affordable housing units, there will be young families, I'm sure. And when I spoke back in the summer, I know specifically, this council, we talked about some green space for play equipment. Specifically asked that question. So can you take another? Can staff take another look at it in terms of are there pockets of lands in that property where that potentially could happen for a grandma or a papa can take their grandchildren there for a swing in that neighborhood?
As I started to say too, it's very early days. So we'll continue to look at that spot. But
Should we take a
staff
look
have
at it?
walked it as well, and we're also cognizant of what we can put in a limited space as well that meets code and regulations for playground equipment.
Are we taking any environmental hazard property as our 5% of parkland dedication?
Yes, there is. My understanding is that there's 2% of land as parkland dedication and 3% of the value for land as cash.
Is any portion of the land deemed environmental hazard property as part of the 5%, Jane?
Sorry, I can't answer that tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Councillor Carr.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor, this might be directed, I guess, maybe towards Amanda. I'm not too sure on this one, but just back to the affordable housing again, I guess I'm having a hard time understanding how we can start enforcing developers to stick to the guidelines that we're trying to set out if we need to make this a policy or not. So from what I heard originally, developer, I'm assuming, I guess is the way I should say that, coming into this, they would have been under the impression that they should have had 6 units sold at under $317,000 is what I understand. From what I hear, he's got 8 units at $350,000, so we're already above that, and we've gone away from that. And then I just want to be clear on that one. And I guess the next thing I'd like to ask more than anything for the answer, for the R3 zoning, you said it generally comes in at 300 square meters. We're going down to 212 square meters. Have we done this with other developers? Have we done this in other spots, or are we setting precedents that we're going to start chopping down lot sizes even smaller?
No, we've reduced the lot size in the R3 below 300. This isn't the first instance.
Within Saugeen Shores, though?
Yes, this bylaw.
Okay.
Answer to the councillor's first question, he was looking for clarity around the affordable housing provisions.
Well, as I said in my report, right now, the affordable housing, the 30%, that's an objective in the town's official plan. There aren't any specific policies that planning staff can look to provide greater direction on the provision of affordable housing in Saugeen Shores. The policies right now under the plan relate more to providing a mix of densities, allowing for, there is under the housing policies, there is one policy that says 30% of new development should be medium and high density, which I think is part of achieving that affordable criteria. But that's what we have under the housing policies, beyond just the objective of 30% to be provided as affordable housing. I would note that the previous subdivision that was passed by this council earlier this year along Spence Street saw nearly 80% of their units meeting that affordability threshold through those stacked townhome units. So we are well on our way this year to meeting that 30% through affordable housing due to that Spence Street development, which saw a large portion. So when we think of that 30%, it really is that breakdown of all the development happening in Saugeen Shores, as well as some of the smaller rezonings and things that we've done throughout the municipality for infill development, which will also help contribute to that target. So until the county official plan and the Saugeen Shores official plan, I know this is an issue that we're going to be looking at closely. I'm on the team working on that homes paper. So we're going to be looking at different options. We're limited in terms of what we can do under the Planning Act in terms of actually requiring any provisions. So it's really just how do we find the right mix of policies that really encourage that type of development in our municipalities. And I know that will be a big focus of the official plan updates at both the upper and lower tier.
Sorry, one more question, just because of the way that you had answered that there. So when we're saying that 30% of development should be considered affordable, we can use that. It's not each site plan that we're talking about specifically. It could be, like you said, the one is meeting the numbers for, so that's...
Yeah, it's a target for new development in the town of Saugeen Shores. That's how it's written. 30% of new development can be provided as affordable housing, and that's the extent of the policy under the current plan.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And I just want to add to it when it comes to the process, if you don't mind. When it's a condition, we have to sign off that condition has been satisfied before they can get their agreement. So we will work with the developer to make sure that they're doing what they can and we're satisfied with what they're doing in the affordability piece. That's why we've made that condition. So our staff's stance right now is that we want at least 6 units. That will be around $317,000. If they're proposing 8 at $350 and we come to agree that that still works, it meets the targets and the definition, it's good, then that's how it will go forward. If not, then they'll be back and forth with the developer. And I'm happy to see that he's already come forward with this step, that he's willing to put this into the plan at all. So I think it's favorable, and we'll work that through that process.
Sorry.
Sure, Councillor Carr, and then we'll come to the Vice
Sorry
Mayor.
about that. Just to follow up on that. So, sorry, can I have that one sit with me for a second and come back?
I'll go to the Vice Deputy Mayor. Vice Deputy Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, can I just circle back to the 5% parkland dedication for a minute? I get concerned when we have such a parkland deficiency north of the Southampton River that we're taking 2% and 3% cash. And I think far too often we take cash in lieu of land's gone forever. And I have a question for you to Tessa. Tessa, the 2% and the 3%, how was that determined? Who made that determination? Which department?
I'm not sure where it came, but again, it's through the discussions between staff and the developer, so I'm not sure who proposed it first, but the developer has come up with what they see as an efficient plan. We work through how much parkland and that we're looking from that.
Well, I only hope that Community Services and our manager, Parks Director of Community Services, are taking a really serious look at these parkland dedication fees, cash versus parkland. It's gone forever. And I believe that we should be putting a strong case forward. When there's parkland available, we should be taking parkland north of the river. Mr. Mayor, I like to receive a report back from staff to outline the 5% and whether we in fact received 5% parkland dedication, a portion of that's environmental hazard property. Because if we did, I'm not in agreement with it. So could I ask for that report to come back about the 5% for the breakdown, please? Can I get that?
Does anybody have an answer to that at this moment? I know the Director of Community Services couldn't answer it, but is there an answer?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm guessing Jay would have the answer on that one. We'd have to break down what the sizes of those blocks, and I just don't have the number.
All right, well, so we can come back. If this passes this evening, it will move on to council, and between now and then, I'm sure we can get that answer.
I'd like to see something back, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to see that 5% breakdown.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Carr?
Thank you. And through you again, Mr. Mayor, I'm not too sure who can answer this one for me or not, but I guess it just boils down to after we've done all this and made it a stipulation that we want to see 30% of affordable housing, do we follow up in that in any way or form that housing's actually been sold at where we've been told it's gonna? Like, is there any way that we follow up on that in the past, or is it something that we should maybe be looking at doing so that we do follow up to make sure that they're coming through with those?
So in this case, there's a condition of draft approval for those 6 units. So the town will have to enter into agreement with the developer as part of the subdivision agreement for the provision of those units. And that is a town condition. So they would be negotiating that through the draft plan and plan of subdivision approval process. In terms of keeping these units affordable beyond that initial sale, we don't have any capacity under the current provincial policy regime to require these units be maintained as affordable for any future sale beyond when the current developer sells them. That would be under the only way to do that would be through something called inclusionary zoning, and we don't currently have the ability under the Planning Act to enact that.
Further comments? I think on the question of affordability, the affordable housing piece, so I think there's no debating that our regulations are inadequate on this point. Everybody's recognized that the county's plan is 20 years old. It's well out of date on this question. So the town of Saugeen Shores' policies are inadequate. We need to be able to do an awful lot more. We're talking about single-family homes at $317,000. What we really need is rental units at $900 a month or less, right? So that's where we're at. But this is not Mr. O'Brien's fault, right? It's the regime. It's the fault of the regime that we have in place that we have to fix. We have to fix it pretty fast, in my view. We're working on it, and we have to work really quickly on it because we have nearly 350 families in this community, and that's just who we know about on the waiting list for Bruce County affordable housing, and then many, many more are marginally housed in this community. That is not acceptable, and we have to do something about it, so we have to get these changes happening. But again, so what can we do now? It's what we have already done. Mr. Bryan came with a plan to us a few months ago. It didn't have a lot of affordable housing in it. We asked for it. He's delivered something. And that's what we can do. And we are now using our bully pulpit, if you like, to get that to happen. And it's worked a little bit. And Mr. Bryan's come forward with an offer here. And I think that it's, for where we are now, that's pretty reasonable. So would I like to see more? Obviously, yes. But I think that this is where we're at, and I think it's a win. It's something, and I think that in this case we should. Well, I will certainly support moving forward with it, and certainly we'll hear back from staff about Vice Deputy Mayor Myatt's comments about Parkland. Certainly, I would like to. I tend to agree with the Vice Deputy Mayor in that we do have to eventually acquire some lands, not just cash. Cash doesn't do you an awful lot of good if you don't have the lands. So we need to think about that. I don't know how that works out in the case of this particular development, but we do have to have an idea what we're going to do and work toward it. So I'm looking forward to hearing that as well. So those are my comments. So you've heard the recommendation. If there's nothing further, I'll ask all in favor. That's carried. Thank you. So that moves us then on to 7.4, Community Services, Parks and Recreation, staff report on single sourcing of the breakwater platform, and the Director of Community Services.
Thank you. Previously, staff requested a pre-budget approval of up to $700,000 to complete the DFO breakwater project by providing a walking platform on the South Breakwater. Staff is looking for approval this evening to single source that out to Seawaves Development from Hamilton, and that's to complete the walking platform. Seawaves was awarded the project through the DFO to rehabilitate both the breakwater and the breakwater extension. It makes economic sense to single source Seawaves while their equipment and staff are deployed at the site. The total cost is $385,000, and that includes the engineering costs as well. And staff will certainly continue to update council on the progress of the project.
So there's a recommendation. I'll read it, then we can take questions or comments. It's recommended that council approve staff to single source the breakwater platform project to Seawaves Developments for the south concrete decking and parapet in the amount of $377,000 plus an additional $8,000 for engineering costs. Questions or comments from the committee? We'll start with Councillor Myatt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be supporting this proposal. It's well within the $700,000 budget that we set aside for this. And I really like the idea that it's going to be significantly wider and more level for pedestrian traffic on top. And I'm sure everybody, the beachgoers and waterfront enjoyers alike are looking forward to having that open again. It's a popular spot for people to walk and fish and recreation activities of all sorts. My question is the dimension is going to be wider. Is the break wall going to be any longer than it currently is?
Not necessarily any longer. It certainly will be higher than what it currently is, to approximately about 1.8 feet higher than where the height is right now.
Waves won't be breaking over it anymore, so to speak, yeah.
That's the intention.
Yeah. Okay, good thing.
The Vice Deputy Mayor?
Two things, Mr. Mayor. First of all, Jane, this is the absolute right thing to do, and I wanted to thank you, Jane, for doing a great job on this project. I know you worked very hard on the funding, the $2.2 million, and I think this $377 is a solid price. Matter of fact, you probably agree, Jane. I guess you go to tender on this, it's going to be a whole lot more than $377,000 because the contractor's there, correct? So it's a very smart move, and so I just wanted to thank you for your good work on it. And the one question I did have is when it extends out to Lake Huron, north-south or west-east, I'm not sure, I get my measurements, north-south I guess, is there a bubble going out at the end or not, or is it just going to be basically the 4 meters wide straight out?
Correct. There will be no bubble or bump head at the end of it.
What about railing sitting areas?
Certainly something, and you will see I made reference in my report in regards to kind of some future considerations and future options we'll continue to have with the contractor. We're cognizant to what we can put out there that we don't want to continually replace, and that can take the demands of the winter storms. Certainly once you start to put something out there, when it starts to degrade, it becomes less aesthetic.
You don't want something to be a maintenance nightmare. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Schreider.
Sorry, through you, my question was answered. Thank you.
Further questions from members of the committee? Just for myself, echo what the Vice Deputy Mayor said. Thank you very much for the work on this project. It's going to be a tremendous project to have complete, and it's going to be a great project to watch. This building this causeway out there, and then the construction down there in the middle of winter. It's going to be quite a thing to see them do, and so I encourage everybody in the community to get down there and check that out while they do it, because it's going to be an interesting project. So you've heard the recommendation. All in favor? That's carried. So that moves to 7.7, communications petitions. Are there any comments on either of those items? I don't see any. There's item 8 there, which is my report. There's no questions on it. Then that moves us then on to reports of the department heads. And the first one is an information report on the developer staff working group. And it looks like potentially the economic development officer, Heather Hyde, will give the report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Developer Staff Working Group was formed in 2017 to facilitate ongoing conversations between developers and the town. The objectives for these quarterly meetings is to increase communication between the town and developers and to build a networking opportunity for the developers. In 2019, we had 5 meetings with 3 guest speakers. 2 were from Bruce Power and 1 from the County of Bruce. Following the last meeting we had on December the 3rd, of 2019, a survey was distributed to collect data from the group's 22 members. The survey received a 55% response rate. Overall, the members agreed that the topics and discussions, as well as the invited guest speakers, were useful and relevant to their businesses. The members are actively engaged in the group and are eager to continue to learn about regional projects with a local impact, including those happening at Bruce Power and at the town of Saugeen Shores. We continue to use the 2017 criteria set for members of the group and invited guests, and have set tentative dates for the 2020 meetings.
Thank you, Heather. Are there questions from members about that information report? Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Heather, my questions are about the 2020 planning and process section, which is towards the end of your report. So in one of the sections where you talk about the process for visitors and guests to the developer staff working group meetings, there's an indication that staff will deem guests to be appropriate or not. And I know what the criteria are, but could you expand perhaps or comment on what factors you'd be taking into consideration if you were deeming somebody not to be appropriate?
Absolutely. And just to clarify, we're speaking of the invited guests portion, not on the members of the group, correct? Because there's two different, there's criteria for members of the group. So for members of the group, we want to ensure that they're actively engaged in developing in the town of Saugeen Shores. So we have set the criteria as those who own developable land or are currently developing in Saugeen Shores, or those who have developed in the past in Saugeen Shores. For the invited guests, part of the reason for these meetings, and one of the reasons why they've been so successful, is due to the neutral environment, which puts participants in a space where they can ask questions and discuss issues with their peers and town staff. So we're careful not to disrupt that balance. So that is the reason why we have a provision that we have the final discretion on the invited guests.
Thank you. I've got one more question then. I understand the need for confidentiality and keeping that neutral environment, but I also have a concern about transparency and potentially seeing developers as a special interest group that in this description of the email communication indicates that they are getting a chance to review draft policies provide comment, which may be a good thing, but it also, I'd like the public to know how you think that this is still transparent, and I'm wondering if it would be possible at some point to share the names of participants without necessarily sharing the content of what they are revealing in your sessions.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. The developers are provided with opportunities to provide input on policies as it relates to their area of expertise. We treat this communication as stakeholder engagement, similar to what we would execute on other town projects, specifically what we've done with the Economic Development Forum, and as you've seen in the tourism strategy with focus groups there. They do not receive exclusive rights to comment, so we do open it up for other groups and other feedback to provide recommendations to council on those policies that have been reviewed.
So when we have a report like the tourism strategy and we identify, okay, here are the stakeholder groups that were interviewed or that gave us information, is that something that staff might talk about in the future in terms of saying here a list of the developers who participated in our group? I'm just wondering why we're not talking about the names.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, it's something we can absolutely look into and bring a recommendation back for that on a formal process of who reviews which policies and the names.
Further comments to that one? Oh, thank you very much then for that report, Heather. So now we have an information report on the operating financial results ending September 30th, and the treasurer has that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report details the operating results for the town of Saugeen Shores from January 1st to September 30th of 2019. Council has already heard plenty from me in recent months about how mid-year results are not perfect and tidy, so I'll spare you from more caution on that. The report itself is again quite positive on our results. For the most part, the major unexpected occurrences are of a positive nature, and we hope that will put us in good position for our year-end transfers, but we do make no guarantees at this time of what it will look like at year-end. The format of the report is identical to the report from the second quarter results, and much of the content is similar as well. I had aimed to put out a report that highlighted variances through the second quarter and then split out additional variances from the third quarter only. But as I looked through our results, it was still primarily those items that we knew of in July that were the main variances. So I'll just point out two examples of that, and that's interest income above budget and the Westerio dividend income above budget. Those are both highlighted in the report, but they are there for the second time this year. And I'll just close out by saying that this report remains a work in progress. We have lots of ideas on how to improve it in 2020. One of those ideas is to start breaking out results that contribute to a particular reserve transfer versus results that contribute to the town's overall surplus position. But we do have lots of ideas and welcome your comments and look forward to working towards that next year. And I'll take any comments or questions.
Thank you. Questions from the committee. Councillor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Thanks, Daniel, for the report. This it certainly does paint a pretty good picture when there's so many numbers in brackets, which I assume is above expectations or above budget. Is that correct? In the spreadsheet.
Yeah. So it's the dollar figures in brackets are expenses or deficits. So if you're looking at a particular column, let's say the 2019 year-to-date budget, okay. Those columns are typically in brackets representing budgeted amounts, so expenses. But if you're looking in the year-to-date variance column,
yes,
that's where the positive amounts would be positive variances, and the amounts in brackets would be negative variances.
Okay, then in that vein, and I'm looking at the article or line number 430, water. Yep. So it would indicate that we're $190,320 above expectations for this point in the year.
That's correct.
And should that continue, we expect that the year end will have a surplus in the water category. Is that correct?
Yeah, if that were to continue, we don't make any guarantee that it would at this time.
No, I'm looking for a guarantee. But would it be plausible then that a consideration be given to at the end of the year if there's a positive above expectations in the water column, that we would consider putting that money back into the gas tax reserve, because we took $400,000 out of the gas tax reserve earlier this year to pay for water infrastructure, which is supposed to be funded directly from water reserves, and gas reserves are supposed to be spent on things like roads and bridges.
Yeah. That wouldn't be part of our policy or our reserve policy as it's written, so that would need to come from council direction for us to do that.
I'll keep bringing it up.
Okay.
I'm not sure we can make any guarantees that will happen. Are there further questions from members of the committee with regard to this? All right, so that's operating, and now we have, after that, capital. And Daniel, you have comments about this one?
Yeah, I'll just repeat that it is our capital financial results for January to September of this year. So keep in mind that it is only results through September, and also keep in mind that for capital projects, invoices often come all at once, so a lot of spending may not be in the report at this time. I'll mention that balancing all of our funding sources down to the dollar with our year-end spending on each project is a large task. So we have a lot of work to do before we have a proper year-end summary that shows council all of the effects on our reserves of all of our capital activity throughout the year. This report gives a lot of detail, so there's probably not as much to enhance as there is with the operating results report. But I will say that we're looking at the timing of our financial and status reporting on projects, and at a minimum we will certainly incorporate this type of reporting into the budget process or ensure that it's available prior to budget next year. And with that, I'm again happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Daniel. Questions? Councillor Schreider.
Thank you, and through you, I know that this was one that I had requested for during budget, so I do appreciate it, and the report is exactly what I wanted to see, Daniel, so thank you. And it's great to hear that we'll actually have it as part of the budget package. And when I look at this, and I do understand we still have 3 months left to go in this reporting, and that $13.5 million that are not spent yet of approved funds, that will actually be reduced quite a bit. I think in all fairness to staff is that I think what's important is that number that we carry forward year after year in projects, and there are justifiable reasons that they don't all get complete in that year that they're approved. But when we're looking at it, could be $7 million, it could be $5 million. That's adding on to $10 million that we're already asked to approve. So that's adding workload on the staff. I think that we just have to be fair with our expectations of staff, and that's why it is important to have this information that if we're approving a $10 million capital, like what we were last week or 2 weeks ago, is that if we're carrying forward $8 or $9 million, that's significant. So this report is great, and I appreciate Daniel bringing it forward, and just want to ensure that we are being fair with our expectation of staff to manage these project loads.
Okay, further questions or comments with regard to this one? Thank you, Daniel, for both of these reports. It's great to see these reports coming forward now on a routine basis, and certainly important reports for council, and we're glad to get them, so thank you. So that is the last item on the agenda, so we'll just do a quick round of announcements by members, if there are any. The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, I just want to give a shout out to all the people at Saugeen District Secondary School, the staff, the students, the Shambettes, and town members who participated in the first ever Saugeen Shores Shares food drive this past weekend. I believe it was an overwhelming success. They could always use more people to help, and the more people you help, the more food you'll get. They required a couple classes of kids today to move everything out of the school. So, like I said, it was a resounding success going to our local food bank. So, looking forward to seeing this again next year. And congratulations to everybody who took part and who donated.
Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of items. I attended and Councillor Matt was there as well, the annual meeting and Christmas social for the Chamber of Commerce. And just want to congratulate Steve Harris, owner of Rosina's, who was elected as the new president for the Chamber. And so congratulations, Steve. And also, Mr. Mayor, I attended the employee recognition evening last week ago Saturday. And I just wanted to say that the volunteers that put that night together deserve a real round of applause, because they did a terrific job. And I haven't missed too many of those over the years. And I think it was probably the best attended employee recognition evening I've ever been to. So that's hats off to staff and our CEO and everyone involved. And I'll forget names. So, but and two employees here this evening, by the way. I don't want to embarrass them too much, but our clerk, 30 years of service, Linda. Congratulations, and our director of community services, 25 years. And gee, did I miss anybody else out there? If I did, I apologize. But I know there's a lot more. I want to congratulate all of our employees who received milestone awards a week ago Saturday. It was just a terrific night.
Thank you. Councillor Schreider? No. Councillor Smith?
I would just like to extend a sincere appreciation to the Association of the Port Elgin Firefighters and their families who, through the night, provided some additional decor to the downtown Coulter Parquet and the Christmas tree. It's wonderful to see what this community can do to come together. They saw a need and they fulfilled it. So that's wonderful. Thank you to all involved.
Councillor Rich? No. Councillor Grace?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 3 items. Last Friday night, the Santa Claus Parade, which was held in Southampton this year, organized by the Chamber of Commerce, was a terrific parade, great turnout, wonderful volunteer assistance. So people really came through to help out the Chamber and the community on that. And then after the parade, GC Houston launched the first of its Fairy Lake Sparkles initiative, which was just a tremendous event. A lot of people down at Fairy Lake, and the school had hot chocolate and hot dogs and decorated beautifully with Christmas lights, and also did a very wonderful memorial tribute to residents of Southampton who have passed away in the last year. And the GC Houston, members of the GC Houston band performed. It was a great event, and we look forward to it expanding, and that this will be a legacy for many years. And then yesterday afternoon, I attended the Chantry Singers Southampton Community Band concert at the Port Elgin United Church. It was a wonderful amalgamation of the two groups in our community, which are really a fine representation of our arts community. And they're doing a second concert right now as we speak.
Mr. Carr?
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, I just want to recognize a few people too when we're talking about years of dedicated service. The fire department through Saugeen Shores just held their year-end appreciation night that we do with associations. And at that, we had 4 firefighters announce their retirement, which we were expecting with the recruit of the new volunteer firefighters that went through this year. So I just want to make sure we recognize our station chief from the Port Elgin Hall, Jim Trendle, retired with 33 years of service. Greg Keeley, a firefighter in the Port Elgin Hall as well, retired with 32 years of service. And in Port Elgin again, we have our training officer, Paul McKinnon, which retired with 15 years of service. And also at Southampton, Glenn Goodale retired with 18 years of service. So through all those, that represents a 98 years of service dedicated to this community that we've lost. So just want to make sure we recognize those people for what they've done. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Councilor Matt? Okay, very good. I think I have as well. So we'll call for a motion to adjourn. Moved by the Deputy Mayor, second by Councillor Schreider. All in favor? We'll stand adjourned till 1:30 the hour.